Hello, everybody. All right, today I'm going to talk a little bit about zone defense, the goals for zone defense, why we run it, and how to run it effectively using some simple cues that you can remember. I'm no expert, these are just my own thoughts on how it should be run. Um, there are a lot of different ways to run it, there are a lot of different considerations. Every zone even if it might be the same formation, is run a little bit differently by every team. You'll have to adapt it to the ways that the offense is scoring and what their looks are, what they're generally throwing to, cutting to. So, you know, add your own flavor to what I'm about to say. Let's jump into it. Before we jump in, I want to provide a little bit of a key for how this diagram is working. You can see here we have our field in green, end zone, end zone. Scoring direction for all of these examples will be scoring in the top end zone. In our key here, our offense players are the blue circles. Our defensive players are these red triangles. The shallow point marks the direction that our defenders are facing. That way you can kind of tell where their hips are. The disc is a white circle. The force direction will be marked here at the bottom of every example. And for defensive purposes, we have this shape, the shaded area, to mark where a defender is covering. That'll come in handy for our zone examples. So the reasons that we will run zone are first and foremost to make the offense do something different than they are doing to beat you in the first place. Specifically, if a team is running pull plays and isolating space well, running a zone is a great way to change the shape of the field and make the offense think about doing something differently. Specifically, changes the way that the space is shaped. And one thing that is a consideration is choosing to run zone when wind conditions make it more difficult to throw things that are over the top or deep throws. Anything that gives you a higher gives the offense a lower probability of completing a pass. Here are some general tips on how to do a zone good. 1. As a defender, you need to see the entire field. That means seeing where all 14 players are on the field, who has the disc, whether or not they are a thrower who's going to threaten lots of spaces on the field, or a few spaces on the field, or no spaces on the field. What the wind conditions are, what the force is, how close they are to the end zone, and how much space they have to work with. 2. Be in a threatening position. You must be covering somebody, or at least look like you're covering somebody. That will lessen the number of options that the offense has. It will discourage them from throwing to open receivers or receivers who look like they're open, and will build pressure. 3. Anticipate the next play that the offense is going for, and do not fall for fakes. By anticipating the next play, what I mean is the offense will try and swing the disc, and they will try and switch the field, meaning they will take the disc from, say, a disadvantageous position to one that is more advantageous. That is something that we have talked about in practice, in running our offense, and every team is looking to do that, right? Every team is looking to advance the disc and keep the disc in a position that benefits them. They are trying to dictate the way that the disc is moving, dictate the pace of play, dictate what spaces they want to work with. And what we are trying to do is play with our brains on and take away what they want. So anticipate where they want to move the disc and do not overextend yourself. So it's sort of a balance that you have to find. 4. Everybody needs to be communicating something to someone else. We don't have complete information because we can only see what's in front of us. So all of these defenders here in this example, the ones around the disc, they don't know where these cutters will be. Oh god. So this cutter could be over the left shoulder or the right shoulder of a defender, and whoever is in a position to give that information to the defenders that are closer to the disc, they are in charge of letting this person know whether they need to cover more left or cover more to the right. 5. Pull the trigger if you read a play. In this example, if we are shading more backfield and taking away this option, the thrower has a window to throw a space between these two defenders. In this trap set, our defender here is roaming and covering this big wide area, and there are only a handful of options that this thrower has, particularly this window or something over the top here. Since you're anticipating the play as this defender, you know that those are two of the major options, especially the ones that you are responsible for. So as you see this thrower starting to make eyes, you are going to try and jump this route and get a block, hopefully. If you do that, your friends should cover the space for you. So let's say this person cuts in. We're trying to jump this route. Either deny this throw for a second as it develops. Now you're covering somebody and also taking away this window. You and the cutter are now clogging that space. So now the next viable throw is something over the top, maybe over here, or over the top over here. Now, this defender has a lot more responsibility, but the options have narrowed. So now it is your job as the second defender to adjust if needed to cover this space or to cover whatever space is left. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, now to get into these different zones. In this section, we'll be talking about the strengths and weaknesses of each zone, what they are trying to take away, and how the zone will adapt to the shape of the field as the disc moves around, either to the open side or to the break side. Mostly that'll have to do with how the cup or the mark is shading, whether they're more inside or more around to push the field into certain positions. So I know rabbit is the first one listed, but we are going to start with a 3-person cup zone, which is in general the quote-unquote standard zone that you'll see most people run. And all of these zones are kind of variations on the concepts that are illustrated by the 3-person zone. We've gone through the positions already. So we've got here, we've got our cup here. We've got our middle, or short deep here, right behind the cup, the 2 and 3 in the cup. Oh my god. And then we have our wings, who are also middle defenders, and our deep. So in this case, what the cup's job here is, they want to basically take away all easy short field options in this area. The cup is responsible for this, and the short deep also plays a part in directing the cup. The short deep can either choose to cover this space between these two defenders, or they can communicate, depending on where these cutters end up becoming active. They can direct the cup to shade more, oh my god, more to the break side and cover this area. Or they can work between these two defenders. The wings' job are to deny anything to the sidelines, up and down the sidelines. So they're kind of covering both under and deep areas along the sidelines. They're communicating with the deep to pass off defenders as they move under and deep. And I will also say that if the disc gets swinged to the sideline, these defenders become a lot more dynamic in that this throw way over the top to this side is less viable, and the defenders have a lot more time to respond to those throws. So the far side wing can start to cheat in, roam around, and hunt for blocks, especially if this big swing to the far side goes off. This cutter will probably go there. So you can kind of see that the field is divided into layers. And those are roughly the three areas that each section of the zone is responsible for. Obviously, these change depending on where the disc is on the field. So if the disc is on the sideline, then you don't have to worry too much about these far swing throws, or at least you have a lot more time to get there, so you can apply more pressure. Again, our job is to compress the field, compress the options into a smaller space. That way we have more chances to get a hand on the disc for a block. Okay, the next two zones that I will go over are the rabbit, or 1-3-3, and a 4-person cup, or a 4-2-1. These numbers refer to those layers that I talked about. So in a 3-person cup, the 3-person is that first number, the 3. That's the number of people in the cup. The 3 in the middle is the number of people in that wall behind the cup. And the 1, the last number, marks how many players are deep. So let's get into the next one. Our next zone will be a 1-person cup. In this example, the rabbit, or the 1-person cup, is the one who follows the disc the entire time. So when the disc is in the middle of the field, we'll be forcing one side, and they are basically responsible for pushing the disc to the open side as much as they can, taking away any rounds here. We want this cutter, this reset, to be the one viable option. The next set of defenders, the first wall here, they're responsible for any short field throws upfield. And then the third wall, the 3 deep defenders, function similar to the wings and the deep in our 3-3-1 zone, but they have less to worry about in the middle of the field, and they're really trying to push cutters into this space or down along the sidelines. So what we are looking for in a 1-3-3 is for the disc to move to the open side. So when that happens, they'll try and get some yards probably. Easy swing goes there. And now the rabbit again goes to mark. The wall follows as a unit. And now the offense will probably try and find some options here. In order to help the rabbit cover more area, if we're not going to make an actual trap call and the rabbit continues to mark, they will, now that we're on the trap sideline, they can come behind the thrower and pressure this backfield throw so that they can't get it back around to this space. We want them to stay on the sideline. And now the wall, the first wall, will reorient like so that they are now almost a cup. So we're denying this reset, and we're denying anything upfield here. What can often happen is this throw down the sideline. Oftentimes, this wing defender will be split to either cover just behind the cup here, and that leaves someone here. So we want to be cognizant of that, anticipate whether or not they are a team that's going to try and throw a blade down the sideline. It's a tricky throw, but some teams are capable of it, and we'll need to adjust. And then once these two sideline throws are covered, this far side sideline deep player can now come to the middle of the field to fill in for these two to cover what they are now taking away, and they can kind of roam in the middle of the field. Because, like we mentioned before, it does take a long time for these big, loopy, over-the-top throws to get to this side of the field. And this defender has a lot of time to, one, see those plays develop, see where these cutters are, and react to the play. So this player is looking to get a block. This player is looking to get a block for this behind reset. And this mark, their job is to really, really, really make sure that the disc stays on the sideline in this position. So to quickly talk about the reason that you would want to run this sort of zone versus, say, the three-person cup is you can see that there is a lot more pressure in the middle of the field on the downfield cutters. These players are being sandwiched now by 6 defenders, whereas in the three-person cup example, there is a lot more pressure directly around the disc and fewer defenders over the top here and here. So this deep often will get overloaded. And now they need to choose. And then these wings get sucked in. And then you'll find options down the sideline. This is all just hypothetical, and I'm moving shapes around, and it might not mean anything. But theoretically, a three-person zone, because there are more people applying direct pressure to the handler, they have fewer immediate options. However, swings are open, and once the swings come through, poppers will try and get the disc down the sideline or through the middle. But in a one-person cup, or a one-person cup with a wall, these defenders have a lot more freedom to be dynamic. They don't have to stay in position, right? Because remember, we're trying to cover a person in our area, so they have a lot more freedom to cover the people that are in their area, rather than like stay as a part of the formation, a part of the marking formation. So you can kind of think of each of these zone options as a balancing act between how much pressure are you putting on the resets and how much pressure are you putting on the downfield cutters. Our next example will be a 4-person zone, which does look remarkably similar to the rabbit. And I kind of like this because you can, on the fly, in theory, transition between a 4-person cup and a 1-person cup, depending on how much pressure the wall wants to apply. So here, in this example, the wall is pushed a little bit wider, a little bit more upfield, because they're responding to the cutters. In our 4-person cup, they are following the disc strictly. So to follow what we talked about before in terms of handler versus cutter pressure, they're putting a lot more pressure on the handler and the handlers and any kind of short field throws. So for a team that is working through their handlers mostly, the 4-person cup would be a much better option than the one person cup. And in both examples, for rabbit and for a 4-person cup, we have the option of making a trap call. You can do this in a 3-person cup as well, but for our cases, we'll explain it like this. So the disc is swung to the open side sideline, reset. If we call trap, the trap call will come from the mark or the rabbit, whoever it is. When that happens, they are now responsible for covering the nearest primary reset. In this case, that will probably be a reset that is behind the thrower, and they are now, like we called before, they are a matchup defender. They are now responsible for covering this dump, or if this dump clears out and another dump comes in and is now the closest dump, they are covering the closest viable reset. Now, as that's happening and the trap call is made, the rest of the cup will continue to operate as a cup, but this player, number 2 in our cup formation, 1, 2, 3, 4, will become the mark. And we again are going to shift the cup to really take away any lateral throws back towards the middle of the field. So you might be flat facing the sideline, so your hips are parallel. So basically this is now a break mark situation. Or you could even come a little bit behind because you have help upfield. So now we have a 3-person cup around the disc, putting a lot of pressure, and we have one defender on the closest reset. This is where we want to have the disc. This gives us a lot of opportunities to take away all of the immediate options that are near the disc here. And so the only options that we have left are throws way big over the defense, and these deep defenders have a lot of time and can also see the entire field and where those opportunities are going to arise. They are baiting blocks. They are hunting for blocks. Okay. Next zone that we're going to talk about is a 2-person cup. The 2-person cup looks a little bit like this, and the main difference here is that the force will be force middle. So coming down, if the disc is in the middle, you just kind of pick a side. Whoever gets down there first can call the first mark. These two, the 2 in the cup, are going to be talking a lot to each other. Every time the disc moves, say this swing goes off, boop, this swing goes off. So now the disc is on this sideline. The off defender, who is not marking, will call to mark. I'm marking, it's my turn to mark now. And they will force the disc back to the middle of the field. This defender who is on mark is going to get in the lane to poach, and they'll be in communication with their nearby defenders in the first wall on whether they need to shade left or shade right, depending on what else is covered. But they will get upfield and poach in the lane and make the disc go back to the middle. The next wall is covering everything in the middle of the field behind these two, and they are sandwiched by 2 deeps. We will use this zone in situations where the offense is taking advantage of swings towards down along the sideline. Okay, now the last defense that I would like to talk about, the last defense that I would like to talk about is a sag or a V cup. As you can see here, we have a 1, 2, 3 around the disc, forming a V shape. This isn't really a zone exactly, because in this setup, the defenders downfield are playing person D, and they are forcing under. So they are backing, staying behind their players, and allowing the cutters to take this underneath space. The reason we're doing that is because the two defenders that are covering the handlers, will say, if we're playing a team that is running horizontal primarily, the two players that are guarding the handlers, the resets, they are choosing to, instead of playing tight, they are poaching off into the lanes. And this person in the middle, if the disc is in the center of the field, they are straight up. Actually, this should be a forced middle. So, in the middle of the field, the mark is straight up. And we have poaches on either side of the thrower. They can choose how tight or how off they want to be, depending on where these cutters end up going. But in general, they are poaching in the lanes about 10 to 15 yards deep of the thrower. Now, if the disc is swung, I'll probably gain some yards. Boop. Disc is swung now to this handler. What happens now is this poach defender goes to mark the player they're assigned to, forcing back towards the middle of the field. And this defender will now go to poach the lane, and so will this defender. They'll continue to poach. So the handler defenders are forming a loose cup zone, and we are forcing the disc back to the middle of the field. Again, denying all of this underneath space. So we will generally use this junk set to deny just the initial play, the initial pull play or set play that our opponents are running, which in general, most pull plays are used to isolate downfield space. So we're getting defenders in that downfield space to take away their first look. My recommendation for running a sag is that we run it for, say, 5 to 10 throws. Most of those throws will be swings, and during that time, the offense or the opponent's play will have been run, executed, and hopefully will have denied it. And from there, after those 10 throws, we'll go into playing normal tight person defense. And we will call out a force on the line so that we are out of that force middle. And after 10 throws, it'll just be a force in one direction.